Nearly 10 to 8, and in his extraordinary 70-year career in broadcasting, David Dimbleby has covered some of, well, all the biggest news events of our times, including, of course, most recently last week at the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II.
He is now giving an insight into these incredible moments in his new book, which features 10 general elections, time spent with Nelson Mandela, and his years chairing Question Time. We're delighted to say David is with us now on the sofa. Good morning.
Good morning.
Well,
thank you so much for coming to our humble studio.
No, this is great. I love it.
Good.
I love it. Look at the view.
It's marvellous, isn't it? It's all real.
And it's always sunny. It's really strange. Always
sunny. I could go for a swim. Lovely.
10 general elections. You must watch what's going on at the moment and just be, again, fascinated by how things are moving.
I'd like to be there for the next general election myself. I am fascinated. I think politics is always like that, isn't it? In a way, it's always, you never quite know what's going to happen. The thing I enjoyed about doing Question Time was that you got a feel all the time for the drama, and people always said, oh, well, when the programme was over and you had dinner with the people afterwards, they must have really told you the truth. And the truth was, I was always so on a high after the programme that I couldn't take in anything they said, that I had to ask the team later on, you know, what was it that the minister said that was so fascinating? Oh, well, he's got the knife in for so-and-so, or she's out, you know, all that stuff that goes on. But, I mean, now, this time, it seems to be all on display for us. I mean, the Conservative Party's election, you know, is just astonishing. And then you have this sudden sort of dash for a different policy. At the end of 12 years, whatever it is, of one way of thinking, and everybody's on their back saying, oh, you can't do that, you can't do that. But my view always is, well, you never know with politics. You never quite know. That's why I call the book Keep Talking, because keep talking. You've just got to keep talking. Actually, perhaps it could have been called Keep Listening in our case. But the idea of kind of people listening very carefully and watching what's happening, I think is fascinating as politics. But my goodness, the dash for growth, well, fingers crossed, I'd say.
It just feels like everything's moving super fast, doesn't it? It's hard to keep track of it. Let's go back to the beginning of your Keeping Talking, because you started broadcasting age 11.
Yeah.
Don't worry. I don't think we've got a tape to play. Don't worry.
Yes, I began when I was 11. I did a thing at Alexandra Palace, which is the headquarters of the BBC. I actually can't remember what it was. The thing I do remember was when I was 12, there was a radio show called Family Favourites, where people simply sent in cards and said what music they'd like. And somebody else was meant to do it. It's the story of my life. Somebody else was meant to do it. And I got hoiked in. Ted Ray, do you remember? You went on this. There was a famous comedian called Ted Ray, and his son, who was my age, was asked to do it. And then Ted Ray said, no, you shouldn't do it. I drove up to London on Boxing Day, and I did this extraordinary thing of reading out cards. And yeah, that was when I was 12. And I kind of got the bug for it. Actually, thinking back, it's the only broadcast I've ever done that I wasn't nervous about, because I was so young. And I thought, just innocent, you know, you just sit here and read these cards, and it's great, and play music.
So, that's an interesting thing. You get nervous.
Yes.
Do you?
Well, I get nervous is not quite the right way of putting it. I get tense and very focused, and yes, no, I mean, for a big broadcast, last week's, we were down at Windsor for 4 days. Watched an extraordinary rehearsal on the Saturday morning of that entire procession going up to Windsor Castle in the dark. Can you believe it? 5 in the morning with the drums playing and the pipes playing and the horses charging around. And it was kind of a strange, eerie scene, beautiful. But all that weekend, I just can't think of anything else except, what am I? I'm just a broadcaster for the final part of the funeral, and it's you know, you're there to try and help the viewer understand what's going on, that's all. But because it's so important, you feel, to everybody, you feel a very heavy responsibility. Question Time, I used to get nervous every single one I did, because I knew it had to work. And if you're not, if you're taking it easy and relaxing, it won't work. That's my view. And so I've never been frightened of feeling a bit nervous. I felt quite relaxed this morning.
God, I was just going to say,
You put me at
please.
ease.
We're doing it wrong, Sally. We're doing it wrong. But I mean, we've just seen the pictures there of the funeral, the commentary. What was it about that made you nervous? Was it getting something wrong or a misstep?
Yes.
I can't imagine you getting anything wrong.
Timing is what makes you nervous with commentary, because my idea about commentary is that it should be very, very restrained, and you don't keep talking, unlike the title of the book. You don't
Stop
keep
talking.
Stop talking, yes. And actually there's a chapter of it called Stop Talking, but it's very difficult to judge, because you're trying to gauge what the viewer is making of the pictures and just nudge them a little bit with, this is the crown, this is the orb, this is the sceptre being taken off. You need to know everything, so you have 20 times as much information, because anything can happen. Things always change. They don't go wrong, but they're just different. The timings are different from what you'd expect, so you have to be ready. But you have absolutely to let the pictures do the work and just support them. And that is quite, yes, it is difficult.
And you say you have, a lot of preparation and more information than you would ever need. In those really key moments, a moment that you know is coming, do you know what you want to say? Is it there already?
Well, the truth is, for the Queen's funeral, burial, the final moment, I actually was watching, and I wrote what I was going to say at the very end, halfway through the service. Literally, I was thinking, what can I say, what can I say? And I suddenly realised that the only thing really to say, not a great sort of thing about, I mean, everybody had done a great deal about, how magical she'd been and the thing. And I wasn't thinking about that. I just thought, this moment, what's significant? And I realised it was the moment when the coffin passed from the public domain to the private, and at 7:30 that night, she'd be back. She'd been our property for years, but for days she'd been our property, and at this last moment she'd return to the family. And so I wrote that down and used that. So I think that's being responsive, really, to what's happening on the screen or in front.
When you're in a moment like that, to what extent are you thinking about your father, Richard Dimbleby?
Not at all.
Not at all?
Not at all.
You're not thinking, what would my father have said?
No. I couldn't. No, I've never done that. I mean, I did look up the words. I mean, I'm very keen on his one thing at the coronation he did, when he had a funny way of using old-fashioned language suddenly. So when the Queen's crown was put on her head at the coronation, instead of saying the moment of the Queen's crowning has come, he said the moment of the Queen's crowning is come. And he did this very right thing. He told the Archbishop of Canterbury, when you lower the crown, would you count 2, 3 before you lower it? Because for the pictures, we need to see it. You can't just dump it on her head. Will you hold it up above her head? Count 2, 3, and then lower.
He was directly...
Any time the BBC is really...
in charge of everything.
Yeah, in charge. Well, all these ceremonies, the BBC is very much... They are kind of part of them, because they exist for themselves, but they also now increasingly... They're there for television. I mean, I don't know what Charles's coronation will be like, but it's certainly going to be televised, and the people arranging it will be thinking about what's it going to look like on television, because, it's we, the people, that matter. These things are not now done like they would have been in the Tudor age, just for the elite. They're done for everybody. So.
And why now with the book? Because there's so much in it, isn't there? There's a lot for you to get through. It's not just the royals. You've met some incredible people over the years. What made you sit and write it now?
I think just that it all came tumbling out. I'd had a pause, and I wasn't doing... I'd stopped doing Question Time because I thought 25 years was enough. And I thought, what am I going to do now? And then I suddenly thought all of this. And then part of it was also... I thought I'd had such fun, and I thought I'd enjoyed so many things, and that was worth just putting down. And then I thought, actually, the BBC is such a great place, and I'm so grateful to it for the opportunities I've had, that I might just also do a paean of praise for the BBC itself. And this is not a pitch, but I mean, just the importance of the BBC, the thread of it through national life. And I wanted to trace that and how it's worked and why I believe it should go on one way or another. So it's kind of, it's not my last will and testament, but I just thought I must share
Let's hope not.
I want to share the fun, really,
Yes.
because I have loved it. And
Do
I
you
want
feel
to
quite
share the
lucky?
fun.
Do you feel quite lucky?
Lucky?
Yeah.
Lucky beyond, yes, absolutely. I mean, when I began when I was 12, did I think I'd be there at, what am I now, 83, still broadcasting? No, of course not. No, really lucky. And I've loved it. I mean, I enjoy it, that's the thing. And it's taken me to all sorts of places and all sorts of, met all kinds of people and done all kinds of different things just by being a broadcaster, you know, and it's just my trade.
You came out of retirement last week for the funeral.
I did not come out of retirement.
That's what
John?
I read. Is that
No,
what that
because
was?
I had the week before the funeral, I had 3 one-hour films I made about the BBC called Days That Shook the BBC, which was 1-hour pieces to camera, me talking about the BBC. It's on iPlayer.
And
Should have
we
watched
will promote it. We will promote it. But is
So I
that the
didn't
plan?
come
You
out of
will
retirement.
keep working.
And I did done the cenotaph. I'm doing the cenotaph in November.
In November.
I mean, I don't have a view. I mean, like David Attenborough, you know, if you enjoy broadcasting and you want to do it, and people will ask you to do it, go on doing it. I mean, I'm full of ideas of things I want to do next.
Go on then.
I'm not going to tell you, because
Come on.
we'll steal them.
I could never steal yours.
You could.
I could.
So, I mean, no, what I mean, you know, I'd like to make a programme about the future of monarchy, because I think that's really interesting, because the change from the 70 years of Elizabeth's reign to Charles's reign, there are a lot of pressures on him to do it differently, to find other ways of doing it, and I think the whole issue of how monarchy works and what its role is really fascinating, so I might do that.
How different do you think this reign of Charles III is going to be?
Very difficult to tell. People go on a lot about his being very opinionated, but on the way here, I was reading a book about Edward VII, way back, beginning of the 20th century, and he was always trying to interfere with things and have his view, and he absolutely accepted that nobody would ever listen to him. So he'd bang the table and say, you can't do this. Oh, well, all right, you better if you want to. So I think it'll be interesting. I mean, that whole thing about whether Charles will influence politics, my guess is, I mean, he says this is a different role, and I'm sure he thinks that. But the idea of what a monarch is meant to do for us, what do you want the monarch to do, is really interesting. How do you want it done? You know, we'll see.
10-part series right there, I think.
10-part series. Dead right. Just the thing. And another visit to breakfast.
Exactly.
We'll have you any time. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank
Lovely
you very
to meet
much.
you.
David,
And
thank
David's
you.
new
Thanks.
book, Keeping Talking, is out now.
Do stay with us. The headlines are coming up.